Alright, I may go off topic a little bit and talk about some of the other places, some of the other cities and townships in Colorado especially, but also the fact that this is nationwide, this treatment is nationwide, it's protocol. That knee on the neck thing that killed George Floyd, that's protocol. That man in Texas, I remember his first name is Tony, I don't remember his last name, and I feel terrible. And I understand he's white, but that doesn't mean that he means any less, and I should remember his name too. But it's not someone whose name is always out there like George Floyd's is. George Floyd is not the only person in America who gets treated that way. I'm going to tell you why. It's because of the laws, how they're written and written by. This is a link. This is in Arapahoe County, Colorado. Arapahoe County, Colorado, that's where Ken and Leah lived. That's where Miss Peaches, that's Kayla Trujillo, lived. Those of you who saw the newspaper clippings back when Natalie Bollinger first disappeared, and you got to see me with my court pictures, and yeah, I had my wrist wrapped up. That was from the abuse from the Boulder Police Department. It still took me a few additional days after being released to get pictures of that. Plus, I had to carry a lot of really heavy gear with disabilities that prevent me from being able to carry that gear, but that's in Boulder. We're going to talk about Arapahoe County in specific, and here's a link. This is from 2012. At the very beginning, the lady asks some very important questions. I want to urge you guys to watch this video. This is lawmakers and people in the judicial system and their ideas. And I've told you how these ideas are, what they are, and how they are in reality. See, their solution when this lady is asking questions on behalf of the disabled who are railroaded in courts, their solutions are to rename it to something else and to have more it too private so that when those people's rights are railroaded, there is not a courtroom full of people to see it happen. When they can call you mentally ill, that is when they turn off their body cameras the most. I'm going to try something out here. Half of people killed by police have a disability. This is from NBC News, okay? NBC News. I'm going to post this up for y'all too. This is really important. I'm not telling you stuff that's bullshit. These are stereotypes that are used to murder innocent people. Stereotypes that are used against the homeless. These are stereotypes, the very same stereotypes that the KKK uses as excuses to harm, well, Jewish folks, immigrants, black people, people who think differently. Same thing with the government, same thing with the police. The police are charged with public safety and security, and we cannot trust the police anywhere not to defend their fellow officers. How many people were killed by police? How Many people were killed by police in 2019. Let's see. One of these says 506. They bounce around quite a bit, it looks like. Some of these are talking about how there is a lot of uses, most uses of excessive force as well. Lower lists of people killed by law enforcement in the United States, both on duty and off duty. The annual average number of justifiable homicide. Jesus, fuck, there's a lot of this stuff, guys, and the numbers go anywhere from a little over 500 to several thousand. But we'll go on the lowest numbers to give the police the benefit of the doubt. Let's say half of the people killed by police last year were homeless or were disabled. That's 250 people. 250 people. That's a lot. When you're homeless or when nobody cares, they don't actually even count those statistics. Let's see how many homeless people were murdered by police last year. Many of the homeless, the way that they're victimized is by the term mentally ill. This is a disability. If you have a mental illness, these are all disabilities. And many of the things that officers automatically put onto the uh, mentally ill list are not mental illnesses, they are disabilities. And in most of those cases, the disabilities is that we're different and you guys treat us much different, despite the fact that we are more intelligent than most and we pay better attention than most. All right, in 2019, the very top one, it says that in Los Angeles alone, 42 unhoused people were shot by police. That's just in Los Angeles. Let's see, 217. Holy shit. 217. When you consider that half of the people killed by police in 2019 had some form of disability, and they killed 502. Half of those people were disabled. That's 251 people. There's also 219 or 217 people who were homeless who were shot to death by police in 2019. And this is according to an update on January 21st in the LA Times. Holy shit, guys. Like, those are, like I said, same stereotypes. You want to talk about how black people are marginalized? That very first video that I popped up there, black people are marginalized in that exact same way too, not because they're black, but because they are assumed guilty, assumed to be mentally ill, because most of those black people were homeless when they were picked up by the police. And they played off of that stereotype of mentally ill. If you are victimized to the point of homelessness, it must mean that you were mentally ill. If people are allowed to victimize you to that point, it must mean that you are mentally ill. Meanwhile, instead of making laws and making ways to use technology like video cameras and audio recordings in order to guarantee that the most victimized people in America are not victimized by people who are charged with their care, such as doctors and nurses and judges and lawyers and foster parents, or the jailers themselves. You guys made fun of Donald Trump and talked about how terrible a person he was when he made fun of that disabled reporter. Most of the police that the homeless have to deal with are doing exactly that to the homeless. Yeah, well, you're broke. We're just going to call you mentally ill. You're homeless. Nobody fucking gives a shit about you. If anybody gave a shit about you, you wouldn't be fucking homeless. And that right there is the point. They know this. They tell this to your fucking face. They turn off their cameras and make fun of your friends who froze to death because it's illegal for them to have a fucking blanket. You know, just 3 days before Natalie Bollinger was shot in the head by Joseph Michael Lopez, I spoke out on New Year's Day about how someone I know was probably going to be found dead, frozen to death the next day. And you know what? Christmas Day, sure enough, there's a Facebook site. It's called Benji Bags or Benji Baggins. I'd like you to take a look at it. I'd like you to comment on it. His real name was Benjamin Harvey. He froze to death because it's illegal to use a blanket. He didn't want to have to spend 60 hours plus, well, 60 hours of slave labor, community service. Plus, you have to pay over $400 between the two charges of camping in city limits and trespassing on public property. But he was on CU campus. He froze outside of the Boulder History Museum Christmas Day, no blanket. Mariah Johnson can tell you about that and a lot more, including the human trafficking by the state of Colorado, as well as many other witnesses. I have their names, I have their addresses and phone numbers in some cases. The problem is that I get called mentally ill. That's one of the ways that they get away with it. There's these rights that you're supposed to have. In that very first video, some of the solutions that those guys come up with, changing the name of a program that doesn't work, that doesn't get our rights not violated or get us listened to. It doesn't get the stuff recorded that we need recorded. It allows us to be victimized further. It doesn't help us not to be victimized. And most of what those guys infer is that the disabled are the ones who are obviously the violent ones. Sometimes when people just get frustrated with us because they don't want to understand, and we're frustrated, and we're like, please understand, we are being victimized at school. We're being victimized as adults. This isn't a decision like you keep telling us. I'm sorry, I'm not pretty like you, Mom. I'm sorry that I can't just be a complete and total slut in high school and get all of the boys and be all sorts of popular like that. And being in the same small town my mom grew up in, where a lot of these people never left, and these are their stories that they've been toiling forever. You know, they don't care that it's inappropriate to be telling the son of Angela K. Wade what a whore she was in fucking high school. I'm sorry. And people just don't get that. I mean, we're looking at some seriously high numbers. We're, and some of those close to, oh my God, close to 1,000 people are shot to death by police officers. Oh my God, see, that's the thing is that we went by the lowest number, didn't we? 502. Some of these numbers for the homeless and for the disabled are way higher. Some of them look like they are right around 500, and that would go right along with half of this 1,000 here. But we went with the smallest ones, didn't we? Of course we did. Why wouldn't we? We're trying to give everyone here the benefit of the doubt that they wouldn't do this to a disabled person, that they wouldn't do this to a homeless person. We're giving them the benefit of the doubt by taking the lowest statistics here. Some of their other solutions are having private courts, and they brought up teen court. One woman named Sarah Victoria Funberg or some crap like that. I kicked her out of a group that I was given by a woman who promised to help me and never did. A woman who promised that she would be my advocate, that she would basically that she would be my lawyer, and she didn't. Her name was Katie Cahill. But despite the fact that she didn't keep her word, the fact that she handed that group over to me allowed me to kick a lot of people out of the group while maintaining the evidence from them that shows what they were doing to other victims, that they were victimizing other people and threatening the lives of other human beings. And yes, this drove me crazy. People were trying to help me, and the police were doing everything in their ability to prevent me from getting the help that I needed. I was trying every step of the way to get the help that I needed, plus get the help that they were saying that I was supposed to get, while the help and the places that they in specific wanted me to go to were not showing up. They were just dragging it out as long as possible until far after my legal right to have those things happen were already passed. And then I was threatened, harassed, intimidated, and physically and mentally tortured by the jailers in Arapahoe County with the very things that these guys are talking about here. And then the judge and my public pretender were allowed to pull more illegal shit because my last two court dates were private court dates. Nobody else was allowed in the courtrooms. My very first one was on the 15th, and my lawyer come and assured me that if I did exactly what she wanted me to, which I'd already threatened to fucking sue her because she had repeatedly not showed up, not done her job every time at the last minute, even after the legal amount of time for them to have my pretrial hearing. They had not had it. It was already past the amount of days that they were legally allowed to have it. They had already prevented me from going to court dates that I had charges of failure to appear in, where they victimized me further. I could not legally be charged with failure to appear because I was already incarcerated. And the law says that, but it doesn't matter when you're disabled because violations of a mentally ill person's civil and human rights don't matter unless you say it does. You have to say that it does. When they're talking about having backroom meetings, no. Hell no. When you're disabled, you need more people there, not less. You need a civil rights lawyer in the courtroom at all times, especially if you are disabled, especially if you are homeless. You are the most marginalized people in America. 217. That's almost half. And over half are disabled. What percentage of those are black? Black lives do matter. So do the rest of ours and the rest of us. We need to work together because it's not just happening to black folks. A lot of black folks can recognize that they do fit into some of these other demographics. What's number one on the list? Foster children. What's number two on the list? Former foster children. Number three on the list, the homeless. Number four on the list, the mentally disabled. Number five on the list, the physically disabled. How many black people fall under those categories? And what do all of those categories have in common? excessive bills, assumed poverty. And in America, assumed poverty means assumed guilt. They don't have to observe your civil and human rights, and that includes the judges. On the 15th of October 2018, they promised me that if I wanted to spend my birthday free, and I planned on going and turning in Pamela McCarty for her illegal actions, marching across the street and doing it that way because I don't have the ability to do it electronically. That is part of the help that I have been trying to get in person, but that's difficult to get when most people are choked into their Facebooks and into their video games on their phones and choked by their jobs and choked by their children and the fear of what the government will do to them if they come forward. And almost everyone who promised to come forward and then didn't broke their promises is because they were afraid for their friends, their families, and their children. And I'm not allowed to be afraid for those people, including these people who are mad at me because I exposed the truth. And they say it put me at risk because you told the truth, because you showed the truth, and because you recorded me telling the truth and telling the reasons that I was afraid to come forward. Like with Alyssa Rainwater, Mandy Hughes especially, saying, hey, Sean, I saw what they were doing to these other people in these groups, and it was scary. A lot of these other people in these groups told me and showed me the things that were happening to them, and it was scary, and they ran away. And the police wrote down whatever the hell they wanted. And all of these people's conversations that I've recorded that they're angry about, all of those conversations show what they said in that court in Arapahoe County was fucking bullshit. And they went out of their way at every fucking step to deny me my rights as a disabled person and to outright victimize me for it. When I say that it's not just the public, it is the police. I am not kidding. The most victimized. I have not been joking. I'm not bullshitting you. They know that they can get away with killing a homeless person by calling him mentally disabled. Oh, he's mentally disabled. No, he's autistic. He's autistic. He's highly intelligent. He is stimming because that is what he does when he's overwhelmed by the environment. And you coming up and being hostile with him and talking to him the way that I was treated by those officers in Wyoming, holy shit. I was trying to turn in child abusers. Oh my fucking God. So they lied, and so did the person who abused those children. And I recorded her admitting to that. And I told you guys before she ever admitted to it in those conversations, I told you all of the tricks that they were using to try to prevent her or I from speaking to each other, to prevent me from getting those words recorded of what those officers in Rawlins, Wyoming did. She admitted that it was because of her alcoholism. Unlike Shannon Alvarado, who wanted to be bully-headed, Shannon Alvarado hasn't been there. There are certain things that Ryan has been through that Shannon Alvarado will never have had to go through, ever in her entire life. A lot of you guys use stereotypes. You know, Shannon Alvarado's daughter is low-functioning autistic, and she is very violent. Mostly when Shannon is being very loud, but she just hates loud noises. At first, I thought from long distance that it might be a noise in the house, maybe a fan that was humming obsessively, possibly the one under the fridge, or something of that nature. No, it turns out that it's Shannon screaming when she's drunk. That's when it is the worst. Brianna admitted it, though. And she admitted the abuse from those children and the terrible things that those children were doing. And I recorded a lot of people that I told y'all about the meth problems and about these people's addictions and what they were going through and with the alcohol and all of that. And I recorded those people's words. Many of those are actually witnesses. Witnesses to the fact that I was trying to get Natalie's family safe. After Natalie was killed, I was trying to get Miss Shelley safe after that pocket dial. I was trying to get a hold of some bikers to try to get them somewhere where they could be protected by some of these bikers. Thinking maybe the Banditos, a few of them. I was thinking more some independents though, because they don't have 1%ers. They don't advertise that. They do whatever it takes to keep you safe. But those guys told me, Sean, the best way to do that is to kill the guys. You want me to have them killed? No, I don't. We need to set the example that victimizing the disabled is not okay. All right, you guys are fighting for black lives and black rights. If you fight for the homeless and the disabled, these people are of every color, of every religion, in both of these groups. Please help us. Most of us were in foster care growing up. We were dropped off with nothing. You have any idea how difficult it is to get all of the things that you need all at once? When you get the opportunity, because you're not in foster care, you get to have a foster, or you get to have a summer job, and you get to earn yourself a vehicle, and then you got yourself a driver's license, and you turn 18, and you've got money, and you've got yourself a vehicle, and you've got a job, and you've got a place to stay temporarily, and you've got possibly even a little bit of money that your family gave you because you turned 18 or because you just happened to graduate, which here in Chapel, Nebraska, a lot of these kids, you know, they know what it's like to get thousands of dollars when they graduate. But when you don't have that, when you're dropped off at 18 with two socks, one shoe, a pair of pants, and a t-shirt, no ID, no driver's license, you don't know how to drive a car, you don't own a car, you're expected to try to come up with, first of all, you got to learn how to do that. Second of all, you need ID to be able to get your ID to get your ID. And you need to travel and you need money to do that. And you need ID to get a job in order to get the money, but you don't have the ID to get the job, so you don't get the money. And the whole time your existence is illegal because you don't have a roof over your head. You're fucking trying. It's going to cost you thousands of dollars all at once to get a vehicle and to get all that stuff. And you guys have all these great, wonderful, nice ideas about carpooling and this, that, and the other. That's a great idea. It really is. It's tough here in Chapel, Nebraska. You guys say that's just making excuses. No. You've had to deal with it, then you know. You've had to deal with it. Now, I'll admit, most of this video is not about children who are actually the most victimized in America. Police don't tend to shoot children or pregnant women nearly as often, but they still do. Less than 0.2, that's 0.2% of our population is homeless. 217 out of 502 people who were shot to death by police last year were homeless. Over half of those were also disabled. So we'll say 252 of that, or 251 of that 502. Let's put both of those numbers together. What do we got? Now, mind you, most of those people are going to fit into both of those categories, as well as being former foster children. And the foster children, they know it ain't no joke. You go into a system that's racist as soon as you get there, no matter what fucking color you are. It's racist. The system is racist. When you are in the system, you are racist by default, or you're going to get fucked up. People will fuck you up. When they can call you mentally ill, they can do whatever they want to you. They can beat you up. They can rape you. They can molest you. I'm going to post up some links specifically from Colorado. A woman who was fucked by police in Colorado while she was in sex trafficking. I'm also going to post for you a woman who was mentally ill, who was raped by an officer in Arapahoe County. He raped her on the hood of his vehicle on a courtesy ride back from the hospital. Woman raped by right. Thornton would actually be I forgot to write Colorado. Might have been Westminster, so I'm gonna have to look that up. Although there's really a lot of these. Holy shit. There are hundreds of these. Sexual assault by police officers. There's literally hundreds of them that are sexual assault by teachers as well. Many of them female teachers. The teachers most likely to seek out the person that they were charged with sexual assault against as a minor. Women teachers are more likely to go try to find their victims, and they are victims. These teachers groom these children for sex. Teachers and police. Here's one. This one's actually in California. And I really do want to find the ones from Colorado and post them up here for y'all. It's extremely important. There are a lot of different victims, and many of them are abducted by police. Police use the fact that it's not illegal in 38 states. It is not illegal for a police officer to have sex with someone in their custody. And then in many of these cases, the victims are charged as criminals for trying to turn in the police. Let's see, perhaps it was Westminster. The fact is that it is Colorado wide. I am having difficulties. Why are these things so difficult to find? It used to be nearly every single day it was easy to find this. But a lot of stuff gets taken down, I suppose, because people find it offensive. If I could remember that officer's name. Holy crap, there are a whole bunch of them, though. Oh my God, these are all over the United States, everywhere but Colorado. Oh, here's one from Sheridan, Colorado. Jesus Christ, all the counties that I've been trying to tell you about, doing all the things that I've been telling you about. Oh my God. And I want to tell you, there's just as much about them trafficking children in the state of Colorado, which I've been talking about since I was a child. Sex trafficking and otherwise, trafficking for profit. Oh my God. Ah, this is it. Although this is only 18 seconds of it, which is kind of annoying. There's a lot more to it. There's also a lot more where people were trying to turn in, as you guys have who have looked at it, I've shown you literally hundreds of pieces of documentation that show you that I've been trying at least, right? I mean, some of those pieces of paper, literally hundreds that I've already shown, do show that I was trying to write down and document all of these human rights and civil rights violations, and also the discrimination against me for my disabilities, and the way they were able to utilize the system in order to prevent me from having those rights. And if you look at the very first video that I made a link to here, it's those laws that the woman at the very beginning is asking the right questions, and the solutions that people gave as their answers afterwards were actually more loopholes. Sheep. There were wolves in sheep's clothing. Those ideas allow the most victimized people in America to be swept under the rug because it costs so much money for them to be sued. But as a homeless person who is disabled going to have the money to sue the cops, and they always laugh at you in the jail, and I mean this, every jail. This isn't a paranoid thing. This is a police and their blue line of bullshit thing. They know that when you are broke, they can get away with whatever they want. When you are disabled, they can get away with whatever they want, regardless of your skin color. If you're disabled and homeless, and most of the black people who are in the prisons were disabled and homeless when they were incarcerated, I want you guys to understand that these are your victims. Yes, there are black people who were murdered who are not considered mentally ill. There were black people who were murdered who are not homeless. And the fact is, we know this. Those are the ones in specific that BLM is speaking out about. Those ones in specific. What about the black people who are mentally ill, who don't have representation in BLM? What about the black people who are homeless and don't have representation in BLM? Did you know that 1 in 10 homeless people is a veteran of the United States military? 1 in 10. And most of those are combat veterans with PTSD. And most of the homeless have PTSD. And most of the courts in America have special loopholes, wolves in sheep's clothing, to victimize people with PTSD. The cops are taught to de-escalate, but then in reality, they just turn off their body cameras and escalate the situation and arrest their victim and pat themselves on the back and say, look what a good cop I am. And they can go home and tell their wife and their kid, oh yeah, I arrested this mentally ill man today. He was a real menace to society. Let's get some more out here. Women speak out about sex trafficking in Colorado. Here's one for you. Please, if it'd be nice if you could watch all of these, but please at least watch the first one and understand that the things that I've been talking about since 2012 on my YouTube or on my Facebook, since 2012, just on Facebook, and I opened my Facebook on 2012 apparently. And I spoke out about it before this, and I tried to get a lawyer before this, but because of homelessness, because of poverty, because of the fact that people can take advantage of me just by calling me mentally ill, they can do whatever they want. I need more representation because I need someone there who is specifically a civil rights attorney. Those people need to be present in every single court date. A civil rights attorney needs to be there to flag civil rights violations there in the courtroom as they happen. And it does need to be video recorded and audio recorded because the human memory is not perfect. And people will lie, twist, contort, and manipulate so that it fits their bias or so that it protects them from their own wrongdoing or from embarrassment. There are so many motives for so many people beyond just skin color. Matter of fact, the worst are against the homeless and the disabled. No, that is not true. Number one on the list is children. Number two is number one on the list is foster children. Number two on the list is former foster children. Number three on the list is homeless people, most of whom are former foster children. Number four on the list is mentally disabled. Most homeless are considered mentally disabled as a bias. That's just a blanket across the top. We're just going to assume you're mentally disabled when you walk into a hospital with your backpack. You must be a junkie. Oh my God. Especially after a youth in foster care, where you are drugged more than anyone else in America, 13 times over, given drugs in quantities as a child that are dangerous even for adults. You know what that's like? Now here's one. Copy link address. Woman who escaped human trafficking now helping others. Denver 7. Who wouldn't cover mine when I spoke out about this very same thing? It says a woman who survived a terrifying past is stepping out of the shadows in the hope of providing a better future for thousands of kids. By the way, she's a white girl from Colorado. Colorado. This very same place. Copy link address. I don't know if I've posted it up yet or not. So I'm going to make sure that it is, even if it's up there twice. Nope, thank goodness I tried it again because I obviously didn't try it a first time. Here's another one. I haven't read this woman's story, but I really want to. And I might listen to it after I'm done making this video. Children drugged in foster care. This is by Diane Sawyer in specific that I'm looking for. This is a very short part of it. Copy link address. The whole segment is actually about 30 minutes long. They also do it to the elderly. By the way, the elderly are also victimized more than black folks, and that is not to marginalize the black folks for saying that their lives don't matter or their cause doesn't matter, because I want to use this right now to explain to you that many of those black folks are stuffed into the same box, the same cube, the same excuses. And we need to fight for them just as hard as we fight for our own rights. Because just like the homeless and the disabled, black folks are also being victimized. People are victimized under these other categories no matter what. Many black people who are not mentally disabled are called mentally disabled in court as excuses, and then they're magically not mentally disabled when it comes to actually sentencing this person. oh, they're mentally ill, so I don't have to take a report from them. I don't have to look at their evidence. And then there is a one-sided kangaroo court held for them, same as there is for us. Just because we are victimized a lot more than black people doesn't mean that black people don't fall under our categories as well. And it doesn't mean that they're not victims of this very same bullshit that happens literally nationwide. And I have saved the evidence to prove that it is nationwide. Instead of making it more illegal to do something that's already illegal, fighting my fight, literally helping me to get my evidence out there, will change the laws and the protocols nationwide because I can prove in federal court that these people did these things. Please help me. This will help black people. It will help white people. It will help the disabled. It will help the elderly. It will help children in foster care and former foster children. It will help addicts and victims to not be victimized further. And that very first video on this live stream, all right, the very first one. Here, hold on a second. I'm going to copy the link address to this one and post it up here. It's about 10 minutes of the one from Diane Sawyer, but there are literally hundreds of these from news stations around the United States. I can prove that this is nationwide. We can use the news to prove that this is nationwide. It's not secluded to just St. Louis or Chicago. A lot of people call me racist because I speak out about the things that are also happening to the mentally disabled, to the physically disabled, to the homeless, and to foster children. That's not racist. To turn situations where people were victimized for those things and pretending that those things don't exist because you know automatically every person in America knows that if they fit into those 5 categories, you can do whatever you want. Especially if they're alone. That is the easiest people to victimize. People who are alone. And those people, because of popularity, are not the ones who are going to be surrounded by 100 people that just have to have their attention at all points in time. I actually did have a lot of people that needed my attention at all points in time. But that's because when they asked for my help, I gave them the help that they were asking for. I didn't ask 10,000 questions. And if they felt the need to tell me the whole story before asking for my help or telling me what help it is that they were asking for, then I understood. And I tried to listen and put myself in their shoes and not interrupt them and tell them a story of my own. Now I do stop and interrupt them and tell them a story of my own because most of these people are people who offered to help me and offered to listen. And then I end up listening to them because when it all comes down to it, they're the ones who need someone to listen because many of these people have gone through the same pains. They want to let me know who it is that raped them, which family member in specific, in most cases, that raped them, their grandparents, their brothers, their sisters in some cases, their fathers in most cases, and in some cases, their mothers. And all of those predators can get away with it by calling them mentally ill. Or by throwing them out into the cold if they threaten to tell on you for raping them. Or calling the cops and charging you with a crime, or driving you so crazy and doing it so much that you just want to kill yourself and you can't say it, or you will be dragged off and you will be drugged and you will be thrown through juvenile court. While people like Sarah Victoria Funderburg in teen court, apparently is where she works. She wants to get onto a Natalie Bollinger page and be completely horrendous and slanderous towards me in such an evil and terrible way. And I would love to show you how that situation went down between the courts and the cops and Miss Shelley, that's Natalie's ex-stepmother, and the situation with Kara Johnson aka Kara Miles. Now, they've gotten to do all they wanted with things that happened months down the road, but they didn't show any of that part in court, how that started or how that came about, and I wasn't allowed to be in those court dates. I was illegally prevented from going to those court dates. They used my disabilities to prevent me from having the rights of a disabled person. And then they used my intelligence as an excuse why it's okay. See, they used a stereotype that is brought on by low functioning autistic people like Shannon Alvarado's daughter, or people who are considered low functioning who actually aren't, or Amanda Demet's son who is low functioning. People have assumptions that are based on that. When they think autism, they think of people like that. And those children, first of all, are not bad, they're overwhelmed. I can tell you that they have environmental overload. That is what does it. You suck in too much information at once, and chances are that these children are actually more brilliant than I am, and I have an IQ of 172. Statistically, there is only one of me for every 70 towns and cities in the United States of America. Meanwhile, I'm called mentally ill, and it's magically justified. The fact that the police broke the law so much and took part in the physical and mental torture and in misleading the public and misleading the media, just like the Bollingers had done. But I had been speaking out. I had been a civil rights and human rights activist for years, for Native Americans, for Black people, for the LGBT, for the homeless, for foster children and former foster children, for the most victimized people in America, for victimized men and victimized women, for rape victims. I fit into the 5 worst categories of most victimized people in America. However, I'm not going to pretend that it doesn't happen to other people. Most of those other people fit into those top 5 categories as well. Most of those Black people, most of those Native Americans, most of them fit into those top 5 categories as well. But civil rights lawyers are very scared to touch those, especially when the person was alone and doesn't have the ability to record it and doesn't have someone there in person. Then that lawyer goes, you know what, they're just going to call you mentally ill and use that as an excuse to railroad you in court, and there's nothing I can do. What you need to do is get somebody in person. I've tried for months. People told me for months. After 7 months of people promising and and over again, when it came time to keep their word, they were sick, or their children were sick, or they were in the hospital, or their children were in the hospital, or they had their own court dates, or they just didn't have the money, or they didn't have the time, or their family had their own stuff going on, or they had their own court dates going on. I mean, a lot of these people didn't get in trouble with the law, but then when I said that these people were helping me, they were targeted by the police. And most of these people have court dates from it. The ones who said, I'm scared of the police, and I'm scared of the Bollingers, and I'm scared of the people who have threatened my life and my friends and family's lives already. Sean, I got to dip out. I can't help you. And they're like, you can't hate me for not helping you. I have to think about my kids first. You're right. You do have to think about your kids, but I have to think about the kids of all of the people who tried to help me, and even some of these people who are still trying to help me. I have enough evidence to put a lot of child molesters and human traffickers and bad police officers and bad judges and public pretenders away in prison. But I don't have the money for a civil lawyer. And they won't look at this evidence. All they have to do is say, oh, well, you were called mentally ill. You'll notice in a lot of those FBI phone calls where I'm enunciating my words, and obviously I'm not yelling or screaming, these officers like Amanda Jonas and like Well, several of those FBI agents, as well as a lady from the Nebraska State Patrol, all wanted to pretend like I was yelling at them. Oh no, I yelled, didn't I, on those videos? You can tell there's a definite difference between me speaking sharply and enunciating because I have zero teeth and me screaming. But a lot of these officers spoke to me in a lot more hostile tone, and their constant need to get physical with me is antagonistic to my rights. It is unwanted touching, and it is assault. When Officer Herb put his hand on my shoulder in the hospital in Boulder, Colorado, yes, legally in the state of Colorado and in the state of Nebraska, both of these states, that is actually considered assault because it is one unwanted physical contact. And you wonder why it is that I am afraid to speak to the police. Look at the statistics, please. Statistically, the groups that the police threw me into are the most victimized people in America. I am highly intelligent. They tried to twist me having my disabilities into mentally ill, which is just a blanket for most of the public, especially conservatives. Apparently, this is the group that, for the most part, just assumes that mentally ill means that you're schizophrenic or that you're a serial killer, and therefore all mentally ill people should be locked up before they have the chance to do these things. No, you back them into a fucking corner and poke them and poke them and poke them and poke them and fucking murder them. And they have no way to stop this, nobody to listen. If we get a judge to order my phone records and I still have access to what my old numbers were and from when to when that I had them, if we get a federal judge to open those records, it'll show literally thousands of calls to these law enforcement agencies across the nation. The ones that I made before I had the ability to actually record it and show it to you guys, before I had access to these things, before people helped me to set up a YouTube on, well, this one right here. This is my one to learn on. I had my own YouTube account before this when it was destroyed for threatening the life of a predator who was threatening my life and threatening the lives of people that I love very much. His name is Ted Bollinger. And here I am in Chapel, Nebraska, where that officer, Jordan Anderson, did not take a report which he was legally required to in a very high profile murder case. And the case of a disabled person, which these officers in this county had had prior dealings with on no less than 4 occasions prior to Natalie's death in relation to this situation. And I'm expected to remember all these years later which officers it was exactly in those situations. The fact is, the officers, they just don't turn on their body cameras and don't write it down. And even if they do have their cameras on, if they don't write it down, we got to go through literally years of stuff. And the cops don't even bother to look at my ID. Sometimes they look at my ID, notice that it's a Chapel address, and don't bother with me. When I first remember Officer Hahn, there was some out-of-towners, and he came over there up to no good for Roy Wilmuth. And he came over with his attitude, and he spoke with me too. And guess what? When he asked for my ID, the exact thing that I told those travelers who I had fed a box of MREs that I was given by Ben Beardsley, a friend of mine from here in Chapel. He give me a box of MREs and I give it to these travelers for something to eat. Roy Wilmuth called the cops on these travelers for stopping in the shade to have something to eat. They picked up their mess and they threw it away. Most homeless do. Most of us spend a lot of time picking up after you guys because we will get a ticket if the area is not clean. Cops will come by. You finally find a place after all day of waiting for a place where normal people in houses aren't sitting because they'll be offended by you sitting there in most cases. So you wait for them to leave so that you can sit there at the nice quiet spot. And you're surrounded by garbage. Now you just want to relax. If you start picking up the garbage, more people might come and sit down there, and then they kind of expect for you to leave. You go and throw the garbage in the garbage can, but you know what? If you decide that you can just sit there, then the cops they come and harass you, and you want to sit in serenity, so you're picking up the garbage anyway in most cases, and even then, police officers will come and give you a ticket for littering. I saw you throw it on the ground. Why the fuck it? Seriously, I picked up 8 pieces of garbage in my hand. One of them fell out and hit the ground. You saw me put all the rest of them in the garbage can. And when I walked back and picked up the piece that fell down, you yelled at me and told me, "Hey, put that down. Come over here." Hold the fuck up. It's kind of like it's not illegal to walk through the parks in Boulder, Colorado if you're a college student. If you stop, the cops will give you a warning. But if you're homeless, then they use that law to stop you. They call you over. They say, "Hey, you come here. Stop. Come here." You know it's illegal to be in the park after 10:30? Well, not if I'm walking. Well, it doesn't look like you're walking. That's because you asked me to stop. You're breaking the law. Now you're getting an attitude. Another one I want to show you is Clearview. Clearview Behavioral Health. This is the place I was in and I spoke out about months before this happened. Copy link address. Several people, 5 people at least, killed themselves in 2018 over Clearview. After leaving Clearview because of the way that they were treated. Most of them were taken in by police officers. Most of these people were trying to turn in police officers when they were taken to Clearview and drugged. This is Clearview. This is months after I spoke out about them treating me in exactly this way. I spoke out about both of the things that they did specials about. The first one that they did specials about, because Denver 7, that's the one who did the thing about the woman who was sex trafficked in Colorado and was raped by police as well. Denver 7 also did a special on Clearview, 2 of them. One of them about them keeping people for longer than they should for government insurance. They actually made a law to help with this that actually made things worse. They made it so they shut down all of the institutions, mental institutions in the state of Colorado, except for ones in the criminal justice system, or should I say, injustice. Please help to make this stop. Please. Now, why is it that I was sent to Clearview? Well, it's because when I was at the hospital before that, they told me that I was there of my own choosing. And I said, all right, then I'm leaving. And they slammed me down to the ground with their fucking pillows. And they injected me in the ass with drugs and said that I was now there by an order from the courts. They still sent me the bill. After everything that had been done by the police to frame me for crimes that I didn't fucking commit, to force me to spend all of my money to go to places where I was being victimized, where I was being literally assaulted and having my life threatened. They used my disabilities every step of the way. And because of my disabilities, I can't get help from disabilities rights advocacy groups because of my disabilities, because I need people to help in person. You know why I moved to Colorado? You know why? It's so I can see my loved ones and so that I can have access to actual resources to help me, because Nicole Peralta had let me know that if I need that kind of help, I need to go to the Front Range of Colorado. And my caseworker with Region 1, Tamara, had said, hey, you need to go to the Front Range in Colorado. And Brenda Dickinson across the street said, there is a lot more help in the Front Range in Colorado. And Sean, they have buses there that'll take you wherever you need to go. And they have this and they have that. And I knew all those things. But also, I needed a safe place there. And Ken and Leah's, these are drug dealers who have an autistic child and know exactly how to victimize him. These parents use those very same bias and assumptions to harm this child. When Ken has a frustrating argument with Leah, he will take it out on Leah's son. And he is probably 18 by now. He's going to have it worse than me. He's not able to control his temper as well as I am. But you know what? Most of you who are neurotypical have worse tempers than me, and I can prove that too. I can show you the statistics and the numbers and the assumptions that most people have and how I had to deal with those things. It's not like in Zaid Atkins' case where he was victimized as a homeless person but pretended it was because he's black. But there is no evidence through that it was because he's black. I have actual evidence. See, now the smoking gun in that case would be if the officer said the N-word at any point in time. The N-word. That would have proven right there that it was because of the color of his skin. But that officer did give indications. I'm sorry, my nose itches. That officer did give much indication that he thought Zaid Atkinson was homeless. And if you look at Zaid Atkinson, you understand why. He looks like he's trouble. You know what? He wasn't trouble. He was picking up trash. But you say that about the homeless all the time. They look like trouble. And the mentally disabled, you make excuses why it must be their fault before they've ever had a day in court. You assume it's their fault and you treat them accordingly. That means that you have not only judged, but you have passed judgment upon another human being. The worst offenders that I've seen for that are the Christians. There's what Jesus said to do, and then there's what we see, and they are not the same thing. There is what the Bible says, and then there is the preachers in most of these religions, Protestant and otherwise, Catholic and otherwise, preaching about the Jesus, but interpreting it, stopping to interpret it every step of the way. The New Testament is my favorite book ever. And I'm not a Christian. I just love the book. I love the fact that Jesus was a servant first to humanity, but also first to his God, because he served his God by his commandment to serve humanity. And he taught all of us to serve each other, and we do not. He taught us to serve people who are different than us, to allow people who think differently at our dinner table. Please help. There is so much more to this. There are hundreds more. They killed 2 people there doing exactly what it is that I spoke out about. Now, why was I put into these places? Assumption of guilt, the term mentally ill, how I was treated when I tried to turn in bad police officers, and also to get the police in Natalie's case the information that they had asked for. However, they tried to do it another way by manipulating other officers and manipulating me and manipulating the media into manipulating the public into harming me. All of this worked in their favor. It made people do everything they could to try to shut off my Facebook, to try to shut off or destroy any evidence, everything that they could destroy to prevent me from speaking out, to keep me on Facebook bans, to try to have my Facebook destroyed and erased, to prevent that evidence from being seen. refusing to look at evidence, my public pretenders and otherwise, and there are hundreds of witnesses on this very YouTube channel that I recorded their words admitting it. Every step of the way, everywhere that I went. The things that were done to me in Rawlins, Wyoming, oh my God. I wish that Brianna would stop long enough for me to explain all of it, because what they did at that hospital, hospitals across America did this. Only once do you have to have an officer accuse you of assaulting him for every officer in America to hold a bias against you as soon as they run your name. Only once does a hospital have to try to cover up the wrongdoing of its people, of its staff, who hold that bias against homeless people that you must be just a junkie. And you can see in my hospital paperwork how those assumptions, these very officers and these very doctors and nurses wrote in specific the bias that I told you that they use as excuses. And there is so much documentation that these are the bias that are used nationwide by hospitals and by police in order to manipulate Congress and lawmakers and their seniors into creating laws that makes it easier for them to victimize the victims rather than help keep the victims safe. This allows police officers to utilize their position to find victims if they are predatory, and it allows rookie cops to learn, starting small, that a little bit of breaking the law is okay. And slowly, over time, just a little bit more breaking the law in the name of catching bad guys is okay. And maybe it's okay to falsify a little bit of evidence or to omit a little bit, or maybe this time it's okay to turn off my body camera. And pretty soon, their body camera is off 90% of the time, and they're dealing with the most easy to victimize people in America, because you know what? When it all comes down to it, that's more money for them. That's more money for their county. That's more money for their jails, more money for their departments, and they get a good job. Congratulations. Our budget is having some major issues, but good job. You are bringing in money for our county and for our jails and for our department, and you are doing a great job. And I want to tell you to keep up the good work, officer. I want to thank you for a job well done from the citizens of this city at the expense of the homeless and foster children and former foster children, where they're now allowed to have backroom kangaroo courts, where they can say this black person, or this white person for that matter, is mentally ill or homeless. And they make a point to bring up that you are unhoused. They always bring that up. He is unhoused. And that allows them right there the knowledge that they can victimize you. And then if you don't have money to put on your books to use the telephone, in Arapahoe County, there was a woman who I recorded her on here. Her name is, hold on a second, I want to get it proper. Mandy Hughes. I'm sorry, I've had to deal with literally thousands of people at this point. So remembering all of their names is not easy. But I have her recorded on here. She tried to take this stuff to the police, so did Alyssa Rainwater. And what the police said, what Amanda Jonas said, is in direct contradiction to what Alyssa Rainwater said and to what Mandy Hughes said. And I recorded Mandy Hughes and Alyssa Rainwater and Amanda Jonas, the officer from Boulder County, saying those things. I was sent back in August after trying to get protection orders from these officers who were victimizing me, trying to get protection orders against them for how I was treated by them. When I tried to turn in bad police officers, and when I tried to turn in the Bollingers and all of these predators and friends of theirs who were doing all of these things, and I was giving them mentally ill treatment. Oh, well, I can't guarantee you that anyone's going to investigate it. That's the point, is that they change the laws depending on who it is they're talking to. And we have it recorded between all of the conversations here, every single excuse that I've told you the police were going to make, because they've been doing it for years. This is not the first time that we have had to address this. Most of the black people incarcerated and most of the black people who were shot They try to fit into a category of mentally ill to justify it, or homeless because it's easier to sweep under the rug. The whole system is this way. It is protocol brought on by bad ideas from people who want to be able to get away with being predatory or want to be able to hide the fact that their officers are breaking the law if in fact they are doing so they can save money. Come on, keep on bringing us in those minorities, keep on bringing us in those foster kids, former foster kids, homeless and disabled. Waylon Lolatai, older. This is the last one I'm going to put up, although there's quite a few of them here. I'll put up two of them here because I just saw one. This other one might be Officer Lolatai pretending to be a good guy. It might be him being an asshole. I'm actually going to watch it. It says it's from 1 month ago. The very first one that I posted is from the people in 2018 that were harmed. Now, there's also Elijah McClain and many others. If I had been black and Black Lives Matters had listened to me when Natalie first disappeared and spoken out about how I was victimized because I was black, even though in reality I was victimized because I was made homeless, because I was accused of crimes that I didn't commit and railroaded in courts I was prevented from going through, and railroaded for my disabilities. I was forced into homelessness because then it magically justifies their crimes in the minds of most conservative Americans. Most liberals as well, it turns out. They're just trying to be a lot more sweet about the fact that they don't understand. They're trying to. That's what I like about liberals. They'll at least try to understand, sort of, although many of them just get to talking and telling us how it is. Well, hold on, have you ever been through it? No? Could you hold on a second and let me explain it to you? Because you're getting a lot of stuff wrong and your assumptions are going to make things worse. Officer Lolatai reports auditor to dispatch. I don't know what that's about, but we'll see it. All right, that's another one that I posted twice, and I do apologize. Now, there's a lot of other situations that I was in. Like there was a young woman named Jeannie while I was staying with Sally Treon in Pueblo, just after Natalie was killed. There was a woman there who was pregnant, who was a meth addict, and a year to the day after Natalie disappeared, her baby starved to death. Now that was also the place where a meth head dragged Sally Treon's daughter through the house and kicked her in the face. And I tried telling Sally, and I tried telling Sally's husband, and I tried telling Miss Jerry, hoping that one of them would do something, because the police don't listen to the homeless or the mentally ill. They don't have to. They can brush us under the rug easier than they can brush a black person under the rug or a Native American under the rug. How many of these 217 homeless people that were shot or killed by police in 2019, how many of those people are you speaking out about? You are speaking out about the 8 who were killed who were black, who were unarmed, correct? How many of those disabled people were unarmed? Most of them. How about those homeless? Most homeless are unarmed. Some of them carry a knife for protection for a reason. But at the same time, they shouldn't be charged with a crime because so many people do pull out knives and guns and just anything at random they can find when they're frustrated to go beat the fuck out of a homeless person with because their girlfriend kicked him out of the house for whatever reason. Maybe she was in the wrong, maybe he was in the wrong, but he can't take it out on her because she's a girl and he knows that he will go to prison if he goes and takes it out on her. He also knows that if she beats the fuck out of him and he pushes her away, then he will be the one who gets in trouble. But he also knows that if he goes and beats the fuck out of a homeless person with a billy club, he is gonna fucking get away with it. Black Lives Matters will make a very big fucking deal if he goes and beats a black person to death. But if it's a black homeless person, who cares, right? See that 217, that's just police. Now, when we talk about the mentally disabled, we're talking about over 50%. Over 50%. How many officers were killed last year? 89. Many of them in car accidents. Less than 50 were killed by another person. Less than 100 were killed in the line of duty, and less than 50 of them were killed by another human being. By the way, that officer that I was showing you in Adams County where I was pissed off it was only an 18-second clip, that officer raped that woman on the hood of his vehicle. And you know what? She was considered mentally ill, and he was supposed to be giving her a courtesy ride home from the hospital. Now, I also want you to look at the number of these violations by the Arapahoe County. Now, why is it so disproportionate between the number of homeless people who are victimized and the number of reports by police or by the homeless against police? It's not that we're not writing these things down, it's that police are saying that we're not giving it an effort, that we're not trying, that we're not writing it down, that we're not calling it in, that we are not making an effort. They say that we wanted it, needed it, chose it, deserve it, or it didn't happen. The same thing that you do to rapists when you are a predator, the police do to the homeless. The first thing they try to do is discredit you and your words by calling you mentally ill, when by law you are supposed to have help and representation because of your disabilities, because you are so vulnerable, because of those disabilities. Many of the vulnerabilities that you have as a disability aren't from your disabilities, but from other people's bias and assumptions and stereotypes. Please help us. Please. I was sent to that hospital for trying to kill myself over how my loved ones were treated, about how their lives were at risk because I existed, simply because I was alive. And Miss Shelley and Miss Danica, they begged me not to kill myself. They said, Sean, if you kill yourself, if it is Ted or Tim Beeson, you have the evidence. We need you to stay alive so that you can speak up in court. These very same women took part later on in victimizing me. But the situation was over how the police treated me and how the public treated me and how the media treated me and how all of these rights that I'm supposed to have were taken away. My housing was taken away. My ability to get my own mail and be responsible for my own mail was taken away. My ability to have my housing was taken away. And that cost me money to have my housing taken away, to be assaulted by Officer Waylon Lolatai took away everything that I had and made me and anybody who tried to help me a target, even more so than Natalie Bollinger being killed. But it's okay because you call me mentally ill. Because I was made homeless. And you say you just need to let it go. No, the Bollingers did not let it go. They kept trying to victimize me. Their predators and their friends who have been doing this since day one have not stopped doing this. Dalton Crawford and Chris Kurth, and these people get special privileges, as well as Tim the Bitch Boy Beeson and their friend Braxton and many other predators that I've had to deal with. And people go, well, look at what you did. No, look at how I reacted to so much. And look how long I went through that before I spoke up. Meanwhile, I grew up in the system, in foster care, and then was dropped off at 18 homeless in Chapel, Nebraska, where there are no resources for the disabled. For shit, especially in the 90s. This isn't the Front Range of Colorado. Tamara was right. She's from Longmont, by the way. She knew her shit. Brenda Dickinson was from Colorado, too. She knew her shit. Nicole Peralta had lived in Colorado previous to that, too, and she knew her shit. Nicole Peralta had to say that she knew a few therapists who said, you know what? The state of Colorado is completely screwed as far as therapists go. Nebraska is better than that. Isn't that crazy? But then you've got all of these government agencies who are getting free tax dollars. It's not free, you're paying for it. So they can do what it is that the police ask. You can look up here, there's at least a dozen of these things where it shows. Well, let me show you this man in Texas. All right. I'm sorry, I keep going off and posting more, but this man in Texas that I've spoken about several times, he's a disabled white person in Texas. Let's see. All right. Tony Timpa, copy link address. Now, mind you, Tony Timpa is not one of the people who would still be alive if I had spoken out. But you know who he is? Elijah McClain, because the very same things that I spoke out about it in Clearview, that video that I posted about Clearview shows that they did that to others. My videos where I spoke out about that still exist. My posts where I spoke out about that still exist. And this is proof that it is happening nationwide. But there's another man, Elijah McClain. Elijah McClain. Here's another one about Tony Timpa, by the way. This is 18 minutes worth of that one from various body cameras. But we're going to look up Elijah McClain because Elijah McClain would still be alive. Elijah McClain and Officer Tatum. Well, let's just go to straight up Elijah McClain. We'll just see what the news has to say about it. People finally care about Elijah McClain. Now, a lot of people said he was mentally ill and justified his death. They weren't just saying that he was black. They were saying he was mentally ill. Pretty fucked up, huh? This one right here. Officers reenacting chokeholds on Elijah McClain. In many of these cases, officers actually outright laughed. Some of the video evidence that I have with police officers that I was able to obtain, and most of it I was not. Most of it because I didn't have a public pretender who would do their jobs, and I didn't have access to a real attorney because officers had intimidated, threatened, and harassed and scared my witnesses and my friends and people who had helped to set up these GoFundMes have been lied to and intimidated and given just a small portion of the information that would justify the crimes of certain individuals who are pressured to commit those crimes by police. And I can prove that as well. Was what Candace Bondurant did against the law? Yes, it is. Why did Candace Bondurant do those things to protect those police? Because she's fucking scared shitless. Her mother, I recorded the conversation with her that proves that as well. Yes, me and Candace had a heated argument. I cursed the fuck out of her. But that argument started because she was too afraid to come forward, too afraid to keep her word, too afraid to go to the police after everything that had happened, just at her house and everything that happened before. What had happened with Miss Shelley and that pocket dial, what had happened with Ran Ingersoll and her husband, all of that happened. All of those situations happened while I was at Candace Bondurant's house. And if you guys have been paying attention to the story, Ran Ingersoll I have had interactions with on multiple occasions since then. And she has admitted on these phone calls and in these conversations that are on this very YouTube that, yeah, the stories that I told about those situations were true. And yes, she actually admitted that she was the bad guy in Wyoming, not me. And the things that I was literally forced to plead guilty to, I didn't actually commit. The things that I was forced because I was too poor and because of what they were doing also there in Rawlins, Wyoming, to pretend that I was mentally ill by kicking me out onto the street, telling me if they find me sleeping at night, they're going to give me a ticket and haul me back to jail, and then calling up all of the hotels in town and telling them not to help me out specifically by name. Meanwhile, I have written confirmation from the people who lived or who worked at some of those motels confirming that. Some of those witnesses were listening to the police scanner the day they came over and arrested me there at McDonald's, and I was telling them about information and evidence in that vehicle of child molesters and abuse against children. And they made sure that that was towed away, that I couldn't get it back. When they released me from jail and called these different places and told them specifically not to help me. And then they made sure that I didn't have anything to keep me safe from the cold. And I went to the hospital to try to get some help, to try to get safe from the cold, to try to get a hoodie, and they told me they couldn't. And then after putting me through the ringer because I was trying to turn in police and trying to tell them about the situation with Natalie and the assault by border police and how I had been charged with assault, they automatically jumped to the conclusion that I was mentally ill and that I was someone who assaulted police officers. I admitted to them how I was treated, and they treated me like it was the narrative that those officers had told so many years ago. And when they released me, the special kick to my face was that although they couldn't help me before, now that they had me charged with crimes, they could give me the money to get on a bus. Now that they had taken away the evidence that I needed and locked some of it up and allowed the other evidence, train, to be dragged off. They did this in multiple jurisdictions across the United States. Jumped across multiple jurisdictions, in multiple jurisdictions, in multiple states across the United States in order to harm me and get away with it. I am more likely to be murdered by police or the public than black people by quite a margin. Statistically, in Boulder County, the statistics of being victimized by police for black people to white people is 5 to 1. Given an if there were an equal ratio of black people to white people, there would be 5 times as many black people in jail as white people, statistically. However, statistically, a homeless person is victimized by the police at a 346 to 1 ratio in that very same county. That means for every person in a house, if there were an equal number of homeless people to people in houses, there would be 346 homeless people in the jail for every one person in a house. And they sit for longer and have less representation, have more secret courtrooms and secret court dates than anyone else. In Arapahoe County, on October 18th, my lawyer, who I had been prevented from firing on October 15th of 2018, the judge would not allow me to fire Pamela Carty for repeatedly not showing up and not doing her job, which all of my public pretenders, every single one of them did that. Every single one of them also refused to look at evidence, despite the fact that by many witnesses right here, their very words, these witnesses' words, not mine, on here, I was trying, I brought the evidence, and they wouldn't look. So on the 18th, after I had been coached into what to say, when I should have had a different lawyer, the first time that I threatened to sue Pamela Carty, and I fucking tried to fire her and her boss, which was, I believe, our second or third meeting, she should not have been on my case then. But they don't have to observe your human or civil rights if they can call you mentally ill. They don't have to do their jobs because nobody cares about the homeless and mentally ill. The mentally disabled, they do. The physically disabled, they do. Even though they're scared. And who people kill the most? People they're scared of. I understand why you're scared with all of these doctored statistics because we're easy to victimize. Because every one of us who is railroaded and victimized like that adds to a growing statistic that makes us all look like we're bad guys and villains because we've been railroaded and we're incarcerated. So that must mean that we're guilty. No, we were railroaded by poverty, by excuses, and by the side effect of PTSD. That's post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, the judge on the 18th, I knew for a fact that the stuff that happened on the 15th, if it was recorded on their friggin' cameras, then what happened on the 18th, if the judge actually went for all of the stuff that Pamela Carty and her boss sat there with me and told me, yeah, Sean, we are on your side with everything that you're saying, but the judge isn't going to allow it. The judge isn't going to allow it. The judge isn't going to allow it. You need to do this. You need to do this. You need to do this. And everything that they had me do was for lies. On the 15th, they told me that in court, see, all of my public pretenders spend about 5 minutes before each court date. Not spent that 5 minutes, but about 5 minutes before I have to go up to the podium, they'd come and talk to me for about 30 seconds to a minute. That's it. I literally never spoke to any of the investigators, despite the fact that I spent the money to go see those investigators, and I was counting on those investigators to do their jobs. But no matter what, you use the term mentally ill, and it magically makes it okay. And that judge knew that what was going on in that courtroom was wrong. Because on the 18th, when Pamela Carty told me, all right, well, what we're going to do is we're going to get these warrants taken care of, but can't legally be or have a failure to appear because you are incarcerated. And we're going to take care of that. Because if I'd had done everything that they wanted me to plead guilty, because that's what I had been tortured into by that point, to plead guilty, Well, there was a lot of earmarks by many of my predators who the police repeatedly refused to investigate. And because I still have that evidence, these police officers can be prosecuted. Nationwide, folks. Nationwide, these police officers did this. As well as the judges in these backroom courts. And on the 18th of October of 2018, my birthday, when I was supposed to be released, when Pamela Cardi told me, well, Sean, on the 15th, when I told you that you had those warrants, and that affected everything that was going on with your courts, and the prosecutor tore up the plea agreement that we were supposed to have as a show and drama, psychological warfare. Her and Pamela Cardi, it was obvious from the moment that I walked into the courtroom on the 15th that her and that woman, who happened to be black, by the way, and Pamela Cardi happens to be an immigrant. She's from Australia. So that must mean that it's okay, because these were women and immigrants and black people. It must be okay that they did these things. My judge was a woman, and she knew that I had tried to fire my lawyer on the 15th. And on the 18th, when she allowed that BS that came out of my mouth because of an empty promise, and because Pamela Cardi came in and told me, all right, those warrants are taken care of, I spoke to the man who checked that this morning. There are no warrants. You're good to go. You can walk out the door today if you do what it is that you said that you would. If you'll go up there and you'll lie and say that we did our jobs. But then if you see what these predators did, like Kara Johnson Miles and many others, and the fact that their words were allowed in my court dates and mine were not. In all of my court dates, and mine were not. And while these were my predators, these are the very predators that I was trying to turn in. Also, Ken and Leah. All of these predators, many of them I had been trying to turn in before Natalie Bollinger was killed, including Ken and Leah, Natalie Bollinger, Maddie Boa, Tim Beeson. And many of these officers. Now you see, yeah, these things actually happened. These people actually exist. Please help. Please don't make it a marginalized issue by making it about 10% of the population. It gets a much smaller percentage of victimization. Please include them in our numbers. Please include black people who are disabled or both. And include the ones who actually were victimized for the color of their skin. But also don't allow them to be marginalized out of the other categories that they are by rights a part of. The first 5 most victimized people in America are all impoverished. That is what all of those groups, all of the top 10 groups have in common. Poverty, or assumed